Welcome to everyone once again on our Saturday morning session. Now we will continue on our topic, what is the purpose of human life? In the last two sessions, we considered many issues. In the last session, at the end, we were discussing briefly on Dharma, Arth, Kam, Moksha. We started this, what you call sequence. But before we proceed on that sequence, we must understand two words. One is Urdhgami. Urdhgami basically means to go upwards, to rise, or we can say that to get enlightened, or to move forward. These are basically the fundamental meanings of this Sanskrit word. Urdh means upwards and Gami means jaane wala, jo ja raha hai. So this word is a very, very profound word. Basically means going forward. Then other word is Purusharth. Purush and Purusharth. The Indian saints and sages have described the human body as Pur. Pur means a city. Pur means habitation. Now why they have described it? Because this human body has everything which you can conceive in this world. It has all the systems which are existent anywhere in this universe. For example, you have a digestive system. With digested, you take the food, it digests it, converts into blood, flesh, neurons and whatnot. You have respiratory system, you take the fresh air and it goes all around your body and refreshes all parts of your body. It has a neurological system through which we have our memory, we have our thinking process, we have our thought, our logic, rationality, all that process works through that. We have excretory system through which we discard the waste in the body. Then we have immunity system which protects the body from different ailments. If you ask a biologist, he will tell you many more systems in human body. Then it houses trillions of cells. Cells are basically living organisms. So those cells are living in our body, so that you can call a huge population of living creatures living inside our body. Even in our stomach, where our food is digested, there are millions and billions of bacteria which live inside. So anything you can imagine in this universe exists inside human body. That is why they call it Pur. Our ancestors, our sages called it Pur. And Purush means the person who is owner of that city. So the person who is owning that, I own this city, so this is my city, and I am Purus. Purus, in that sense, it's not male or female. It's the owner of the city which has been, continuing with our journey of life. So whether it is a woman or man or a boy or any other creature, in that sense, that is Purus. It's a what you call larger sense of the word Purus. We also use Purus in the sense of male, but that is a very narrow sense. In the larger sense, it is anybody who owns this city. And Purusharth. Purusharth is again what is the meaning of that whole ownership of the city. How do you move forward? What is the, what you call, ultimate core of that city? That is called Purusharth. So Purusarth is again to take this city forward, to take this city upwards. That is the meaning. Now these two words, Urdhgami and Purusharth, they indicate towards the purpose of human life. So it becomes very clear by these two words that we should move forward, we should move upwards. Now, why should we do that? Let us take the example of Agni. And Agni is used precisely for this reason for most of our rituals. Because Agni has certain properties which are unique to that element, and those are all Urdhgami. For example, when you light a lamp, it goes upwards. It's Urdhgami. While you put the water somewhere, it goes downwards, but Agni goes upwards. It defies gravity, so it is Urdhgami. Secondly, Agni gives light. Immediately the darkness disappears. So it is enlightening. So there is another property of Agni. It enlightens us. It enlightens, remove the darkness, the things which were not visible, which is not understandable, they are revealed because of Agni. Then Agni is giving you the warmth. It gives you urja, energy. It gives you the strength. That is the property of Agni. And then Agni is the greatest purifier of all. Anything you put in fire, it is completely purified. सोने का सुहागा बना देती है. You put all the waste, it is reduced to zero and consigned to their respective domains. So Agni has these four great properties. It is Urdhgami, it goes upwards. It gives you light, which enlightens you, which removes darkness. It gives you energy, that is the urja which comes from, gives you warmth. And then it is purifying, and in fact the greatest purifier of all. Water is also one of the purifiers, but Agni is the greatest of all. So this is the example given for human life, that we should become like fire. And actually the human body operates on the system of fire. The whole digestive system, we call it Jatra Agni or Agni. The 5 types of pranic energy is originating in Agni, in fire. So we have this great example of fire, which is also Urdhgami. So these 3 things, Urdhgami, Purusharth, and fire, these 3 are indicative of the journey of human life, that we have to move forward. Now, how it has been actually embedded into the systems which were developed by our great ancestors. If you look at the whole sequence of Dharma, Arth, Kam, Moksha, it will reveal that trend going upwards. If you also look at the ashram system, if you look at what we call the 4 systems, 4 stages of human life, in which in the first stage we do the learning, that is brahmacharya. The second stage is grasth, third is vanprastha, and fourth is sannyas. This also, I'll explain how it indicates a journey going forward, going upwards. So let us look at this first. In the first stage of life, in what we call Brahmacharya ashram, we learn the knowledge, we get education. It is like the four stages of life, dharma. So you are acquiring dharma, your acquisition in this stage of life is to know how to abide, how to establish yourself in dharma. So that is the brahmacharya and dharma. They combine, they prepare you for the journey of life upwards. That is the preparatory work. That is the what you call elementary school, which prepares us for the further journey. The second is earth calm, in that sense, the two. And here we have Grahastha ashram. Now, Grahastha ashram are linked with earth and calm. In the Grahastha ashram, you get married, you have your family life, you earn money, and then you perform your family duties. That is closely linked to earth and calm in the sense that after acquiring the education of dharma, establishing yourself in dharma, you start earning wealth. Why earning wealth is important? Because without earning of wealth, you cannot discharge the essential functions of your life. You cannot even maintain your human body if you are not able to nourish it properly. So it is an important aspect of human life. The earth has to be there, and this is directly linked with the second ashram, that is Grahastha ashram. Similarly, after acquiring wealth, or simultaneously while acquiring wealth, you fulfill all your desires. Fulfillment of desires is very, very important. Because without fulfillment of desires, you will not realize the futility of doing that process. I gave you the example of Yayati in our last session, that how he lived 1000 years, stealing the youth of his own children, one after another. And after 1000 years of life, fulfillment of his desires, earning wealth, fulfilling all kinds of desires, he realized the futility of those desires. He realized that they are not going to serve the purpose you are looking for, because you will still feel thirsty, you will still feel hungry, you will still desire more. If you are desiring more, means you are not fulfilled, you are not purned, you have not accomplished the task for which you are set to accomplish. So this process, earning, that is educating yourself, earning wealth and fulfilling your desires, is essential part of human education. And that is why this sansar in which we live, this world in which we live, is called a Vidyapit. It's like a center of education. It's like a university where we get educated. The first university is the school, college, or university where we go. The second more important university is the world in which we live. While living, we fulfill our desire of money, we fulfill our other desires, and that is where we learn that the entire exercise of living in this world is futile. As Yayati realized after living for 1000 years. We also realize it after living many lives, but this process is slow and we move from one step to another slowly. So what I was coming at is that this is a urdhgami process. Firstly, it takes you upward. It's like also the process of consciousness rising upwards from mineral regime to plant regime to animal regime to human regime. The consciousness rises. Our ancestors said that there were 80 lakh species of life, 80 lakh yoniya. Now, out of those 80 lakh species of life, the process is going upward. From plant life, you become animal. From animal life, you become human. That is also taking us upward. Because plants and animals do not have that level of consciousness where you can realize what is this universe. You cannot ask these questions. What is this universe? Why I am here? What is life? Those questions are asked only by human being when the consciousness has risen upwards. So this urdhgami journey of human life is the process in which we learn about the futility of fulfilling desires, fulfilling, earning wealth, acquiring positions, acquiring status. All those things are experienced with futility. Now, most of the people who are here in the group, including myself, have experienced the best of the world. They have acquired enough wealth. They have fulfilled their desires to a great extent. Some of them, almost all of their desires. And still we are looking for something more because we are not satisfied with this life. We feel that we need to reach somewhere else. That desire means that all this which we have done was in certain ways, it was an education for us that this is not all. We have to go beyond this. And that process takes us to a different dimension of life. And that dimension is called moksha or total liberation. Now, before we go there, I would like to explain a little bit about dharma. Because dharma is not the first stage alone. Dharma is embedded in all the stages. When our sages talked about dharma, dharma is the education which we learn in our first ashram of life, but it is linked with every activity we do. If we are earning wealth, it should be done in a righteous way. If we are fulfilling our desires, that should also be done in a righteous way. Therefore, the dharma is embedded in the entire sequence of human life, one after another. And therefore, I would like to read out a few verses, maybe 2 or 3 verses from Mahabharata, which explain, because Mahabharata is a great writing on dharma. It tells you what is wrong, what is right under different circumstances. There's no firmly established rule about dharma. When Yudhishthira was asked, the so-called embodiment of dharma, Yudhishthira was asked, what is dharma? He himself said that it is like walking on a naked sword. You don't know where you are going. At sometimes it looks solid like a mountain, and at very next moment, it becomes liquid like water. That is what was his answer. So I would like to read out 2 verses from Mahabharata. One is from Anushasan. There are 18 what you call parvs in Mahabharata. One of the parv is Anushasan, one of them is Shanti. So I would like to read one parv from Anushasan, which reads like this. शांतो दानो जित क्रोधो धर्म भूतो विहिंसकः धर्म रतमना नित्यम नरो धर्मेण युज्यते. This is from Anusasan chapter 142 verse number 32. It means a person who is forgiving by nature, or who is forgiving, who is self-disciplined, has conquered the anger and does not cause pain to others, is in unity with Dharma. Now this is something like the Patanjali Yoga Sutra Yam and Niyam, the first two steps. This is what it says, that you should be forgiving, you should be self-disciplined, you should conquer your anger, and you should not cause pain to others. Ahimsa. So this is what Dharma means here. Then there is a verse in Shanti, another part of Mahabharata. It's a verse number 23 of chapter 160. It reads like this: Suvratas sil sampana prasagna atma atmavid buddh prapya loke satkaram sugatim pratiprapatite. It means the one who has conquered his self, has feeling of friendship and goodwill towards all, and dignity of conduct and cheerfulness, is in unity with Dharma. Now, these are many harsh criteria that you have to conquer your own self. All the sense organs, your mind has to be under your control. You have to have feelings of friendship and goodwill towards all. You have cheerfulness, dignity of your conduct, then you are established in Dharma. So these are, there are many verses which explain this concept. Let me read out one more. This is again from Shanti, chapter 262, verse number 9. Karmesam ye Sraddhuhityam sarvesam chahiterat karmana mansa vacha se dharm ved jajale. It means who has in his heart always the well-being of others and is wholly given in acts, thoughts and in speech to the good of others, he alone knows what dharma is. So the crux of dharma here is that you have to control yourself, you have to control your sense organs, your anger, you have to think of the good of others, and you do not cause harm to anybody else. This is the fundamental principle in which the first we have to establish ourselves. We have to establish our own, what you call self in that process. So this is the great lesson which is embedded in the path or journey of human life if it has to go upward. If it has to become Urdhgami, if it has to become like Agni, then we have to start with that path. Then we are on earth, we perform our duties of family life, fulfill our desires, and then talk about the liberation, the moksha. Now, what is the moksha and what is the liberation? Any seed which is formed into a seed will fructify if it gets right conditions. You have a wheat, wheat seed. If you put it on the earth and if it gets right conditions, the right moisture, and there's sunlight coming, it will fructify, it will turn into a wheat plant. Similarly, the human actions which get converted into seeds they will fructify as soon as they get right conditions to fructify. That is an essential aspect of human life. So we have to make sure that we do not leave the seeds behind. All the seeds are demolished before the human life comes to an end. And then only we can attain complete liberation. If any seed is left behind, then we will have to come back, because that seed will fructify. It will get right conditions. Those conditions are created by the Almighty, by the nature. And we have to come back in this life. And once we are back in this life, there's a risk that we will create more seeds. We might come back only because of one seed, but then the risk is that while we are living that life, we might create many more seeds. And then again, we might have to come back. And that is why Krishna in Bhagavad Gita many times says that you have to work, you have to function, you have to act without any desires, niskam bhav. You don't have desire, or you can abandon the role of karta, that you are not the doer. You should withdraw yourself as the doer, so that you have no responsibilities. Then all responsibilities are on the doer. You have surrendered to the greater doer, and you have taken, like for example, you are CEO in a big organization. The person working under you, he surrenders to you, and he says, I'll follow whatever instructions you give me. Then whatever he does under those instructions is also your responsibility. It becomes your responsibility, not his. Because he is following your instructions as it is. And since he is following your instructions, you take the responsibility. The same thing happens with the human life. If we surrender and we take orders from the greater power, the Almighty, and we say, whatever you tell me, I will do, then we do not take responsibility. He takes the responsibility. Our seed is demolished. Our seed is destroyed. Then we do not create a seed, and we don't have to come back in this life. Now, moksha and nirvana. Buddhists use the word nirvana, and Hindu literature basically use the word moksha. There's no major difference between the two. These are the two different words. Nirvana basically means, like you light a lamp, there's a ghee in the lamp. The lamp will continue to burn as long as there is ghee. Once the ghee is finished, then the cotton wick will burn away. And once the cotton wick is also finished, then lamp will be completely extinguished. And that is the state of nirvana. Nirvana means that all the desires in you have disappeared. All that ghee has gone away. Then all your mental faculties have also settled down completely. They are also burnt away. And then you are left completely sunya, zero. And that is the state of nirvana. That is what Buddha said. In terms of moksha, moksha means that you have fulfilled all your desires. It's the other way around. It's the purna. On one side the purna, on the other side is sunya. The philosophy of Buddha is based on sunyata. The Hindu thought is based on purnata. Here you fulfill all your desires, and then you realize the futility of all that process. After fulfilling those desires, you realize that this whole exercise was futile exercise. Why did I do it? Once you realize that futility, you detach yourself from all those things and you get away. And that is called liberation. That is called moksha. The meaning is the same, the ultimate destination is the same, process is somewhat different. But it's not really different, it's the two opposite ends of the same, scale, which leads you to nirvana and to moksha. So we have to dismantle the seed. How do we dismantle the seed? Now again we should learn three Sanskrit words. We talked about them briefly earlier. Vrati, Pravarti and Nivrati. Vrati is the one which leaves impressions. Like when we have for example, a wound on our skin, on our body somewhere. Once the wound is healed, it leaves a scar. So Vrati is something like a scar. If you are doing everyday morning prayer to the Almighty, then a sort of Vrati is established. You have a set pattern which is established, and that Vrati becomes your Pravarti over time. Then you are inspired to do that prayer every day because that Vrati has become Pravarti. It's like water, you put water on roof of a house, it will flow towards the lower side, and it will form a sort of mark there. If you keep putting that water again and again, the mark will become stronger and stronger. It is the same way that the river flows. The river is like a Pravarti. The water from the mountains come, it flows in one particular direction. Initially it forms a small little mark, and when it continues to flow over time, then it forms a river. It forms a stream, and then it forms a river. The same way Vrati becomes Pravarti over time when we continue to repeat that action again and again. So that becomes Pravarti. Pravarti is the one which leads towards seed. It helps us in preparing a seed. The seeds are prepared because of Pravarti. Whatever Pravarti we take. There's a Pravarti towards earning wealth. There's a Pravarti towards looking after your family. There's a Pravarti towards, being jealous against somebody. So these are all Pravartis which we developed by acquiring that repetitive power of a Vrati. So we have to ultimately reach a state of Nivrati, that we should not create this Pravarti. Vrati should not convert into Pravarti. It should become Nivrati. It should not leave any mark. If this mark is not left, then you do not create a seed, and then you don't have to come back in this universe. You are liberated. You are part of that great universal consciousness and the greatest intelligence, the greatest power in this universe. Then you become like a drop merges in the ocean and becomes part of ocean. We become part of that greater ocean called Paramatma. That is possible when we are able to leave away all our vratis. Firstly, we should stop converting them into pravartis. Secondly, we should leave away all vratis and reach the path of nivrati. Nivrati basically means that you become either sum, that is, you are not differentiating between pleasure and pain. You are not differentiating between heat and cold. You are becoming sum, that is sambhav, that is one part where you become nivrat. Second part, you can become what you call remove yourself as the doer. Once you remove yourself as the doer, then no vrati, no pravarti will be formed. You will be completely unaffected by the actions you are doing, because you are performing those actions under the guidance or instructions of the superpower which governs this universe. So these are three methods, that is Niskam Bhav, that you do not have any desire to do, or to remove yourself as the doer, or thirdly, you become, you surrender yourself completely to the Almighty. Ultimately, they reach you to the same place, whether you do surrender, that is, surrender and bhakti are correlated, Niskam and Gyan are correlated, and removing yourself as Karta, that is also related to yoga, where you reach a stage of Samadhi. So these are the, we can call them mission of life, but I would call them, what is the mission of life? If somebody asks me in one single sentence, I would say mission of life is to understand life. What is this life? To understand the nature of life and then to transcend it. That is mission of life. To understand this life, we have to experience this life. We have to pass through lower to the higher stages. We have to start with dharma, arth, kam, and moksha. We have to start with brahmacharya, grahastha, vanprastha, and sannyas. We have to start at the lower place and become urdhgami. We have to start, we have to act like Agni, where we become completely urdhgami. We are looking upwards. When the level of our consciousness grows higher and higher and higher. And once it grows higher, it will transcend this world where we are living today. All these, what you call the activities we perform, the functions we perform in this world, they would become in certain ways like you perform a role in a theater. So you perform a role in this theater and you rise above and go away. That is how it should work. Now, I would not like to conclude this whole thing here, because there's one very important aspect of mission of human life, which needs separate, understanding, and I would like to deal with that in another talk next week. But before I conclude today, I would like to mention, we started that human life is the only life. This is like a roundabout from where you can take different paths. Now, human life is the only life from where you can think about these issues and you can rise upwards. In other lives, those are mechanical. Those are like completely robotic lives, life of an insect or an animal or a bird. Those lives do not give you this process, do not give you this liberty. This liberty is available only to human life. That is first part. So we are lucky that we are in human life. Secondly, the second part is that, do we have to have a mission in life? I would say yes. We have to follow certain constraints of life. Those constraints are divided into three parts. The constraints set by the nature, the constraints set by our what we call prarabdha or by our sanskar, and third, the constraints set by the society in which we live. Working within those three constraints, we have to find our path which is taking us forward, which is urdhgami. That is how we have to move forward in human life. Then we have to understand one thing very clearly, that the futility of living in this world, and that experience can come only by living in this world. It cannot come by people telling you. Like my father, your grandfather must have told you, all of them must have told us that don't be angry, help others, uh, don't become too much kamuk and things like that. I'm sure all of us must have been told by somebody or the other in on these lines, but that does not help. What helps is the actual experience of life. You learn swimming only when you go and dip yourself into the water. A great trainer can give you all kinds of explanation about swimming, theoretical lessons, but that does not make you a swimmer. It can never make you a swimmer. A good driver will tell you all the techniques how to drive, but that doesn't make you a driver. You ultimately have to sit down in the car and drive, then only you become driver. Similarly, we learn all the shastras, we learn all the writings of great people. That does not make us experienced in the world. The experience comes only when we go deep in this world, experience ourselves, then we learn that process. And we have to learn the futility of living this life in this world. Then we will try to transcend beyond the world and we will rise upwards. And that is what we have to learn in this life. This life is not a futile exercise. This life is a Vidyapit. It's a university. It's a place where we learn. It's a learning day and night. That learning is the only way which will lead us towards what we call the mission of life by understanding the life. We have to understand the life, what the life is, and then we will automatically find what is our mission. The mission is to go upwards, to raise our level of consciousness. Like from insect, the life becomes in animal forms, then it comes into human form. From human form, it should become divine. It should rise further up. That is the mission of human life. And that mission is comparable to the life, to the example of light, Agni, which gives enlightenment, which gives warmth, urja, which removes all the darkness. Similarly, a person should raise himself to a level of a higher consciousness from where he is able to dispel the darkness, from where he is able to provide energy to others, where he is able to provide goodness and good conduct to others. That is where the human life should reach, and that is what the Mahapurushs do. The Mahapurushs set an example where others are enlightened, where others can emulate their path, where others can learn from their experiences. But ultimately we have to learn our own lesson. That is a must. We can learn from them, but we also should experience ourselves as Yayati experienced over 1,000 years, and then he realized the futility of the human life, the futility of living in this world with all kinds of desires and engaging into the world. So this is what I would call. Now there would be, as I mentioned, another talk on this issue, on which we will analyze how we remain engaged into this world. That is very important, because the whole process of engagement into this world is directly linked to transcending this world and rising upwards and achieving a higher level of consciousness. So I would stop here. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. But we will continue on the same topic one more time next Saturday. Thank you.